In the middle of the hospital gala, I stood, took the mic, and said 3 words, read the clause. Forks paused mid-air. A violinist's bow dragged a squeak across the string. 400 people in tuxedos and sequins turned their heads toward me like a school of fish. My sister's husband, Greg, rosy and smug behind the podium, froze with his champagne flute lifted. The lights caught his teeth. The projectors, primed with his slideshow, threw a glossy render of a new pediatric wing across the wall. Right in the middle of it, my hand, steady as a metronome at 68, tapped the envelope against the mic stand. "Read the clause," I said again, softer this time. The MC's smile faltered. The hospital board chair glanced at the attorney 2 seats down. My son David put his head in his hands like he could hide inside his tuxedo. Before I rewind and tell you how an old librarian from Maple Ridge, Ohio, walked into a black tie gala and broke the room with a sentence, "Do me a kindness, hit subscribe and drop a comment with your city or town. I like knowing where folks are listening from. It helps me imagine your faces. It helps me picture the rooms you're sitting in while we talk. Let me take you back to how we got here. 14 years earlier. I am Eleanor, but everyone in Maple Ridge calls me Ellie. I was born and bred in a town you can find by following the river and the billboard for a fireworks warehouse that's been closed since '98. I've got a farmhouse coffee mug with a chipped handle and a tidy little ranch house with mint green shutters, the kind you paint yourself when your hands are restless. My hands have been restless most of my life. I grew up with a father who worked the mill until his lungs turned to paper, and a mother who could stretch soup like it was a piece of elastic. I married my high school sweetheart Jack the summer he got his apprenticeship. We had 2 children, Laura and David. And I became a school librarian because books were the first place I found a way out of a room without moving a muscle. Jack died in 2009, 3 days after his 59th birthday. He was supposed to fix a leaky porch light. Instead, he fell off the stepladder and never woke up. You don't need the details, only that I remember the sound the casserole dishes made when his friends from the union set them down on my kitchen counter. Glad hands, heavy hearts, ceramic clinks. Those sounds matter later. Remember them. The next years were made of small things. I baked pies for funerals and quilts for babies, worked 2 shifts, days at the school library and nights at Whitman's grocery checking out potatoes and detergent. The beeps of the scanner became a sort of Morse code. A lot of people think older women are all softness and recipes. I am soft, and I carry more steel than I ever wanted. In 2011, right before Thanksgiving, the wind coming off the river had a knife's edge. I was putting away the last of the autumn books, the ones with orange leaves and talking pumpkins, when a boy in a hoodie asked if we had any books on electronic money. "You mean like those virtual tokens?" I asked, because I read the journals. I kept up. I like to know what teenagers are whispering about. "Yeah," he said, looking at his sneakers. "They say you can buy pizza with it." He checked out a computer magazine. I brought home last month's copy, tucked it under my grocery list, and read after everyone was asleep. It talked about internet coins, built on math and consensus, and a thing they called a chain you couldn't unring. It sounded like science fiction and blue-collar common sense rolled into one. Nothing about it promised easy money. But it whispered to me about networks that didn't need gatekeepers, about neighbors who could trade apples for pies without someone standing in the middle taking a fee because they had a marble desk. The next day, I made fudge for the church bake sale, wrote the recipe by hand on little cards, and counted out what I had in the coffee can under the sink. Money I'd scraped from coupons and tips and selling a set of antique spoons I'd never liked anyway. It wasn't much. It was exactly enough for a used laptop from a pawn shop and a starter bit of those internet coins folks laughed about on late-night radio. I remember because my sister Pam said, "Ellie, if you want to throw money away, I can set up a bonfire." She said it with that laugh, the one that sounds like a tea kettle that never boils. Pam married into a last name the town respects, Hayes. Her husband, Greg, sells development the way other men sell cars. He shakes hands, he slaps backs, he says the words vision and leverage like scripture. He also sits on the board of Maple Ridge General Hospital and belongs to a golf club that keeps their tea times handwritten like a secret. We had turkey at Pam's that year. The house smelled like furniture polish and cinnamon pine cones. As folks settled with pie plates, the men drifted into Greg's study, as if the wood panelling had a gravitational pull. Someone asked what I was doing for my retirement, since the teacher pension wouldn't stretch. The words left my mouth before I could tell them to stay. "I put a little in those internet coins," I said, casual as you please, like I'd just bought bulbs for spring. The pause lasted just long enough to be mean. "Mum thinks she's a hacker," my daughter Laura joked, but her eyes slid to Greg, measuring which way the wind blew. Greg laughed too. "Ellie, I have a bridge to sell you. Those things are for basement trolls and smugglers. You have actual grandchildren to think about." "I am thinking about them," I said. "They'll grow up in a world that runs more on math than men who call themselves gatekeepers." It got a bigger laugh. David grinned because he was 23 and wanted to be in on it. He loved his uncle, looked up to him, grew his beard to look older, wore a tie to Thanksgiving. I tried not to mind as long as he wasn't smoking. That was the first time my family laughed about internet coins. It was not the last. The thing about being laughed at is it can stunt you like a cold snap. It can also make you stubborn. I took my fudge money and I bought a little bit of something nobody respected. I learned how to keep the codes safe, how to double-check the addresses, how to test with amounts so small they wouldn't sting if they fell through the cracks. I wrote a string of numbers on a card and slipped it inside a page of the church lady's cookbook under an old recipe for pineapple upside-down cake. Don't ask me which book. You could sleep in my house for 100 years and never find it. Remember the cookbook. It comes back around. A few years later, those internet coins started climbing. Not like a rocket, more like a stubborn vine that refuses to stop. I didn't talk about it. I worked my jobs, built a rain barrel, repaired the stitching on my winter boots, watched the numbers on a dusty screen the way you watch bread rise. Curious, detached. By the time my son brought home a girl named Sabrina in 2015, Greg had his fingerprints on half the town's deals. He'd been elected to the hospital board chairmanship. The man knew how to use a podium. He was always honoured and humbled, and somehow ended up with his name on the wing. He liked to introduce me as our favourite librarian, the way you pat a dog that could bite you but doesn't. Sabrina was a glossy girl who called her handbags pieces. She leaned into David and made him taller. That's not a criticism. We all want love that lifts us. I could see, even then, how she tilted toward power like a sunflower. How Greg lit her up with talk of venture funds and how legacy meant his name carved in limestone. I wanted to give her a chance. I always want to give young women a chance. It's hard to marry into a family with a ready-made pecking order. I brought lemon bars to her birthday and taught her how to roll pie crust in summer so it doesn't shrink. At Easter 2016, I got seated at the kids' table. Pam said it was because the dining table had a little wobble near my chair. When I stood to refill iced teas, I heard Greg in the hallway talking to a man in a suit I didn't know. Their tone was careful, hushed in a house full of noise. "Just make sure the invoices go through the property LLC," Greg said. That way we're not technically paying ourselves. I'll file it under vendor management, the man replied. Board never sees the raw ledger. That sentence stuck to the inside of my skull. Vendor management. Board never sees. It didn't fit with their glossy brochures about community stewardship. I wiped my hands on my apron and went to check on the ham. People think older women are invisible. Sometimes it's useful. Summer came. The hospital did a fun run. I passed out water cups and watched athletes with their knees wrapped like gifts. Pam wore a visor. Greg shook hands and kissed babies. He told a reporter how Maple Ridge General was leaning into efficiency, which is code for something if you've ever balanced a checkbook on a kitchen counter at midnight. A new company took over the hospital's maintenance contracts. I recognized the address on their business license because I used to shelve their mail when I filled in at the post office. It was the same as Greg's development office. That felt almost too easy to be a red flag, like a trap you set for a child, and they walk right into it. I said nothing. Not yet. You don't light the fuse until you know where the fireworks are pointed. When my son proposed to Sabrina, we all gathered at the lake, offered toasts, took pictures against a sunset that looked like a sugar spill. There was a moment, remember this, when David came to me with a stack of papers and said, "Mum, Sabrina's folks have this whole wealth planning binder, and Uncle Greg said it would be smart if we consolidated you onto our plan too, just to keep things simple." "What things?" I asked, eyes on the lake where a flock of geese was making a racket. "You know, your pension and any accounts you have," he said, careless, like bubbles. "Just so if anything happened, someone could handle all your online stuff." "Do you mean power of attorney?" I asked, calm. "It's normal," he said, and kissed my cheek. "You still have the cookbook with my favorite banana bread?" I gave him the banana bread recipe on a separate card. He didn't ask for the other one. This is where the story starts to twist, not fast, like a rope collecting rotations slowly, waiting to uncoil. A winter storm took down the old oak behind my house the first week of 2017. It fell so gently it left a dent in the snow like a giant elbow. I called a tree service and recognized the young man who came in the truck. He was the kid in the hoodie from the library, all grown up, wearing a ring and the set look of a guy who pays his bills. We talked about everything and nothing. He said, "You still into those digital coins?" "A little," I said. He laughed. "You remember when they cost less than a pair of decent boots?" "I remember when bread was 29 cents, I said. He grinned and hauled away my oak. If you think that big tree is a symbol, well, I won't argue. Sometimes a fallen oak is just a fallen oak. Sometimes it's the piece that makes you see the whole shape of your yard differently. Spring brought invitations. Greg and Pam hosted a little wine thing for the hospital board at their house. I was asked to pass hors d'oeuvres. I don't mind working. I do mind being made to feel like furniture. At that party, a man in a striped tie told me my son was lucky to have parents unafraid of modern vehicles. "She means her internet coins," Pam stage whispered, and the knot of men giggled like they were 12. I felt the sting. I put down my tray. I went out on the porch, and I let the Ohio night cool my cheeks. Soon after, Mrs. Doyle from church came to me with a folded note. She's been on every volunteer committee since the fire of '72. The note had a photocopy of what looked like a maintenance invoice. "I found it in the copier tray at the hospital when I was running flyers," she whispered. "Does this look odd to you?" It showed Pinecone Facilities, LLC, billing the hospital for consulting. The LLC's owner address. Same suite as Hayes Development. Greg's outfit. "Thank you," I said, and I filed the copy in my recipe box behind peanut brittle. I told you the boxes matter. People think I am gentle. I am. I'm also careful. I started walking the river path in the evenings and ended up at the county office a few times, flipping through public filings, ownerships, votes, little things that added up to a shape. I didn't know exactly what I was looking at. I knew it made the hair on my arms rise. In the school library, when something doesn't line up, I pull another book. I pulled a few more here. Then I did the thing young people forget you can do. I listened. To the man at the hardware store who muttered that his contract with the hospital vanished for a new company with a fancy letterhead. To the janitor who told me his buddy got laid off and a contractor took his place at twice the rate. One Sunday, after service, I stayed behind in the pew while folks filed out. Pam was talking to the pastor's wife about the gala coming up in the fall. She said they were excited to announce a massive donation to kick off the new wing. The number made my eyebrows go up. It was large enough to light up a newspaper's front page. It was also enough to make a person with influence feel bulletproof. That afternoon, I called my son. "Meet me for coffee," I said. We sat in the back of Morrison's Diner. Yes, named after the family that used to own it, not that you know them. And I laid out what I saw. Not accusations, patterns, questions. "Mum?" he said, leaning back like I'd drenched him with cold water. "This is paranoid. Greg is the reason the hospital is even afloat. You don't know how complicated the finances are. You read a few forms and think you're a detective." "I didn't say I was," I said. "I said something smells off." He laughed, not kindly. It wasn't his laugh. It was a copy of Greg's. "You're out of your depth." "I live in this town," I said quietly. "Depth is just where the water comes up to your chin." He scoffed. "What do you even know about this stuff? You think your internet coins make you Warren Buffett?" I looked at my son, the child I'd taught to splint a broken branch with popsicle sticks. "No," I said. "My internet coins make me aware that systems can change. That's all. I'm asking you to keep your eyes open." He got up. "I'm not doing this." He dropped a 5 on the table and went to find Sabrina. In the glass door's reflection, I saw my face, and for a second, I didn't recognize the woman there. Not because she was old, because she looked like someone who'd lost the right to speak. I went home, rolled out pie crust, and then I walked the river again. I made up my mind not to say another word until I had more than questions. You can insult my taste in money. Don't insult my common sense. Remember this moment. People think the fight started at the gala. It began here, in a coffee shop with a bad clock and a mother deciding she would not be gaslit by her own child. I wish my son had not been the one to swing at me. But if it wasn't him, it would have been someone else. People do dumb things when they think they're standing next to the biggest man in the room. Over the next months, the humiliations came like sleet. Small, stinging, unrelenting. At my granddaughter Maddie's school concert, I found my name scratched off a volunteer list and replaced with Pam's friend Mel. At the hospital's spring luncheon, they had me at the back near the kitchen doors, and every time a server pushed through with a tray, I got a whiff of dish soap and a jolt in the shoulder. Pam saw me there and put a hand to her chest. "Oh, Ellie," she said. "I had no idea you were coming, or I would have—" "I RSVP'd," I said. She blinked and smiled and did nothing. Real smiles reach the eyes. Hers didn't. 4th of July, the family group chat exploded with memes about Grandma going to the moon. Someone had photoshopped my face onto an astronaut. I almost admired the creativity. Then Sabrina texted a link to an article about elder abuse and danger signs and said, "Not about you, Ellie. Just good info." My fingers shook so hard I typed my reply 3 times before I got it right. "Appreciate it," I wrote. "Good info." Then I turned my phone off and watered my tomatoes until the soil turned dark and cool. If you're wondering whether I told my daughter Laura any of this, I did. She listened. Laura's always listened. She's got empathy like a lighthouse, steady, far-reaching, sometimes spooled on herself until it becomes worry. She said, "Mum, maybe just keep your head down till after the wedding." And I said, "Okay." I am great at keeping my head down. Ask any woman who's baked 1,000 cookies for fundraisers and never once saw her name in the program. The final straw snapped in September. I was in Pam's driveway, dropping off a punch bowl, when a white SUV pulled up and a woman in a blazer with dental office energy got out. "Mrs. Whitford?" she asked. I could spot a sales tone under politeness. "Yes," I said, friendly, because that's my default. It's not a weakness. It's a choice. "I'm here about some planning documents," she said smoothly. "Your family asked me to help get your affairs in order." "Are my affairs disordered?" I asked. She laughed like a wind chime. "Of course not. It's just that in this digital age, many families prefer to centralize." "Power of attorney?" I said. "Durable? Medical? General? Which one are we talking about?" Her smile brightened by a shade that wasn't friendly. "All, ideally." "I'll consult with my attorney," I said, and stepped back. Her eyes flicked to my hands, to the door, to the SUV, cataloguing. She gave me a card with a sunburst logo and the kind of font that says, "Trust us, we have conference rooms." I tucked it into my pocket and didn't invite her inside. Later, I called David. "Don't do that again," I said. "It's for your own good," he said, and it was the tone, patient, talking to a child, that made the snap happen in my chest. "For my own good would be you respecting me," I said, and hung up. Then I cried until my face hurt. I tell you that because I don't want to be the kind of narrator who makes herself a marble statue. I cried. I wanted to stop the car, turn around, and drive back to 1996 and try again. But power isn't getting hurt or not. It's what you do after. I slept with my phone in another room. The next morning, I washed my face, sat at my kitchen table with the morning sun cutting across the laminate, and made a plan. Did I have a secret weapon? Not yet. I had 2 things that matter more: time and attention. Those are what people with money think they're buying when they hire a consultant. They can't actually buy yours if you're careful. Only you decide where to put it. First, I quietly called a woman named Nora. She's an accountant who moved back to town to take care of her mom after a stroke. She'd done a few free seminars at the library about finances for single-income households that made me want to stand up and clap. She doesn't smile with her teeth, but her eyes, those laugh lines, tell you you're safe. She had a side business doing forensic work for small non-profits that suspected misuse. The thing about small towns is everyone knows not just the gossip, but who gets things done. "I'm not looking to burn the house down," I told her. "I'm trying to find out if we've got wiring problems before we turn on more lights." "Start with the switchboard," she said. We went through public filings like we were unspooling a scarf: contracts, vendor lists, leases, cross-reference pins with addresses. She found that the hospital leased storage space from a development company that leased from a shell that owed its mortgage to a bank that was very quietly shopping that mortgage because someone had missed a covenant. If you're thinking that sounds like a Russian nesting doll, you're right. One shell inside another, until folks get tired of peeling. "Who holds the note?" I asked. "Redwood State Bank," she said, swirling her tea. "They went on a buying spree a few years ago, and now they're shedding what they can't stabilize." Would they sell to an individual? I asked. She looked at me. They'd sell to a hole in the ground if it came with wire transfer instructions. This is where my internet coins come back to the story. Remember, I hadn't told anyone what the numbers on my dusty screen were doing. Not even my daughter. Certainly not my son. I had never cashed out because the tax consequences were labyrinthine and the technology for doing it cleanly used to be a circus. The circus had moved on. The grown-up ticket office had opened. I spent a week calling lawyers not from here. I interviewed 3 and picked the one who told me no 6 times in our first hour. People who say no in an initial meeting are either underpaid or honest. He was honest. I had him call Redwood. He came back 3 days later with numbers. Another day with terms. Are you serious about this? He asked. I am, I said. My voice didn't shake. He showed me a piece of paper. This would put you in a position where, if the underlying tenant breaks leases or violates certain terms, you can call the note. That could force a sale. And if they're ethical and clean? I asked. Then they keep paying rent and everyone's happy, he said. You'll be the most boring rich person in your town. Good, I said. I'd like that. It took another month to liquidate what I needed. Not 90%, not half, but enough. And to do it in a way that didn't announce itself. My attorney lined up a trust. We put the building inside a little company named for a tree that doesn't grow in Ohio because misdirection matters. Then I sat with the weight of my secret. It felt like sitting on a bench at the river with a billion butterflies in a jar, dying to be let out. I'm telling you the number now because it matters at the gala. But then, I didn't try to calculate my net worth in big fonts. I measured it in the friction it removed from my neighbors' lives. The senior center roof leaks. The shelter's pantry is empty. The band program's uniforms wear out. The hospital claims poverty, while the board chair wears a watch that could fund textbooks for a semester. A week after closing, a dishwasher at my house broke. I laughed doing dishes because it felt like the universe was checking me for humility. I've always washed dishes. The sound of ceramic against ceramic took me right back to Jack. Nora came back with more. An audio file. Don't ask me how, she said, but I did anyway, because I believe in consent. A mid-level guy on the maintenance side had quit. He'd recorded a few conversations on his way out because he wanted a severance and some insurance. Not noble, useful. Curiosity is not the same as nobility. Both can drive you somewhere. We listened at my kitchen table. The recording was muffled, but clear enough. A man, Greg or his parrot CFO, said, "We'll bump their rates by 18% and push it through with a consulting scope. File it under Pinecone." Another voice laughed. "The board never reads the appendices?" I felt the kind of cold that starts in your wrists. I thought of all the bake sales we did to buy defibrillators. I thought about Mrs. Doyle's jars of coins. I thought about the janitor who lost his job. I'm not a vigilante. I'm a librarian. When you have something like this, you don't light a match. You call a reference desk that has badges. We took it to the charitable law section of the state. If you don't know this exists, you should. They look into non-profits that might be using people's trust as a piggy bank. I called the county paper's investigative reporter too. Young woman, ponytail, desk a mess, eyes like a hawk. She didn't promise headlines. "We chase the story," she said, so I trusted her. Journalists who promise you fireworks are selling tickets, not journalism. If this sounds like a lot of work, it was. And I had to do it while still moving through a world where my family thought I was a punchline. Sabrina hosted a bridal shower where the theme was champagne dreams. I brought a quilt I'd been sewing at night. Soft blues, little squares of fabric from their first date's restaurant napkin. It's a thing I do. And lace from my wedding dress. She opened it and said, "Or handmade," with a smile like a sticker that didn't quite stick. Her friends clapped politely and moved on to the monogrammed luggage tag set worth 3 times my grocery budget in '92. Later, Pam pulled me aside. "Florida or the Carolinas?" she asked, as if we'd been talking about my life and not Linen's. "For what?" I said. "Your winter community," she said, a little impatient. "We can tour some 55-plus places when the wedding's over. I don't know what you think your internet coin fantasy will do for you, but this..." She waved at the air. "It's not glamorous. It's continued awkwardness." "Glamour's never fed me," I said. She squinted like she couldn't see me in the sun. In her defense, my outline doesn't fit the silhouette she's used to. I almost hesitated. Almost. It would have been so easy to go quiet until I died like the good women in old photographs, faces blurred by time and dust. Then Ms. Doyle showed me a picture of the hospital's NICU from 1984 and said, "We used to fit 3 to a room." And I remembered my Laura-born breech and stuck in a bassinet under a heat lamp, and how the nurse with cracked hands tucked an extra blanket around her legs. Institutions aren't marble. They are people and their scratching pens and how they do or don't fudge numbers. If you think I did any of this just because my family mocked me, you don't know me. That part lit the fuse. The part that kept my hand steady was the janitor and the blanket, and the fact that a hospital is a promise. You don't break promises to a town that fed you. The gala approached. The invitations were thick like expensive frosting. The theme? Hearts and horizons. A glossy flyer made the new wing look like a spaceship. They promised speeches. They promised a named donation. The paper ran a teaser about a transformational gift from a legacy family. It did not say which one. Everyone in Maple Ridge guessed. Some guessed right. Some didn't. 5 days before, my attorney filed paperwork with the hospital. It was boring on purpose. He sent over a pledge agreement for a donation of $120 million from an anonymous local trust, with restrictions and a clause required for acceptance. He added a quiet letter about conflict of interest policies and how the hospital needed to certify compliance. Nora and I triple-checked it. We had a version that forced the board to attest that none of the covered committees or officers stood to benefit from any vendor or lease that touched a board-controlled entity. If they signed it, they'd accept oversight with teeth. If they didn't sign, they'd turn down a transformational gift with the press watching. I admit I smiled thinking about that menu. The clause had a kicker. If they signed, and then later a covered party was found to have conflicts, that person would automatically be removed from any board or subcommittee and subject to a review by the Attorney General's office under state charitable law. It's not illegal to insist on clean hands when you're writing a check with numbers that make grown men sweat. People who tell you otherwise have never used a checkbook. We also arranged something else. The day of the gala, Redwood State Bank would register a notice that the note on the storage building had been purchased by my little tree-named company. If you're wondering why that matters at a gala, it doesn't, until it does. Remember that building. It's where the maintenance invoices that padded their pockets ran through. They used it to warehouse supplies and hide markup in the dark. Shining a light on dark places never goes out of style. The night arrived. The Riverstone Hotel ballroom smelled like lemon polish and rich people's perfume, the kind that makes you think of magazine pages. Gold uplights made the walls rosy. The centerpieces were white orchids in glass. The program listed names of donors and committees. My name was in fine print next to Decor Volunteer, even though I'd declined to help with the centerpieces. I pinned my hair. Wore a dress I'd found at an outlet last spring and tailored myself. It's amazing what you can do with a needle and YouTube. I took my seat at table 12 with the cousins and the dentist's wife, and a couple I only see at fundraisers. The wife calls me Ellen each time, and I never correct her. My sister Pam had a dress the colour of a bruise. Greg had his tux cut too tight, on purpose, to show he'd paid for custom. He gave a toast about legacy. The projector behind him showed the wing's future lobby, with sunlight streaming through windows that don't exist yet. The waiters began pouring coffee. The violinist lifted her bow. That's when I stood up. I didn't plan to. That's what I'll say under oath. But plans are one thing, and the way your feet do their own math in an emergency is another. Excuse me, I said to the MC, a man whose hairline had many products in it. Before we proceed to the pledge, there's a condition to read into the record. He blinked. Ma'am, the board. Read the clause, I said, and in that room that eats words with its velvet curtains, mine landed like a stone in a still pond. Even if you know where this is going, sit with me for a breath. It matters that I could hear the soft tick of the chandelier as it cooled under the air conditioning. It matters that the busboy near the back paused with a tray of crème brûlée and scanned the room like a soldier. The hospital's counsel stood. She had good shoes, sensible heels, not stilettos. That made me trust her a little. She approached the mic. Her eyes flicked over me, not cruel, but assessing. She took the envelope, slid a sheet from it, read. She read how the foundation would accept a restricted gift, how the restriction required the board to certify that no officer, member, or covered party had any financial relationships with vendors or landlords whose payments flowed through board committees, how violations would trigger automatic suspension pending review by and a referral to the state's charitable law section, how acceptance of the gift constituted acceptance of the clause. Greg coughed a laugh, like I was a sitcom rerun. Well, we love accountability, don't we, folks? He said, trying to ride my wave and make it his. Of course we'll accept with gratitude. Then sign, I said pleasantly. And before you do, maybe, just maybe, play the audio. You could feel the room flip like a pancake. The strides of the security team near the doors stuttered. My attorney, who'd been sitting at the bar fiddling with his napkin, stood and nodded to the AV guy we'd hired for the tribute video. We'd paid him triple his nightly rate 5 days ago to also queue up another file at my signal. He looked to the hospital counsel. She looked to the board chair, who looked to Greg, who smiled like a cat with string in his teeth. Play what audio? Greg asked, smiling broader. The one where Pinecone gets an 18% bump, and the board never sees the appendices, I said. The projector screen flickered. The file name on the laptop simply said, track. The audio filled the speakers. Even with the ballroom echo, even under the murmur of shocked noise, the words were clear. The room quieted like animals under a snowfall. Then the second voice said, file it under Pinecone. And I watched 4 heads snap toward Greg like puppets whose strings were yanked. This is outrageous, Greg said, but his voice went high, thin. This is doctored. This is... The hospital counsel leaned into the mic. We'll take a brief recess, she said. Her hands were steady. She looked at me. She wasn't warm. She wasn't cold. She was doing her job. Before you recess, I said, one more thing. A man I hadn't seen in 12 years put his hand on my shoulder and sat down beside me. He looked like he'd aged on camera. Lines, silver at the temples, the kind of stillness you only see in people who watch a lot of courtrooms from the back row. Act like you're with me, he whispered. We don't spook the horses. The reporter from the county paper stood, this time with a cameraman from the local station who must have smelled a story from half a county away. The bank's filing hit the wire 3 minutes later. The hospital's counsel's phone buzzed. The security guy's radios popped. Redwood State Bank just registered a change in beneficiary on the storage complex note, she said quietly to the board chair. Her whisper carried. Who owns it? Someone asked. The trust, my lawyer replied, the one offering a gift. I should have been shaking like a leaf in a January wind. I was not. I was a maple tree whose roots go under 5 houses and a street you think you own. It felt like standing up for a kid other mums were making fun of. It felt like explaining overdue fees kindly to a child with cheeks pink from the walk. It felt like finally telling the popular boy to sit down. Now. If you're thinking, Ellie, lady, why didn't you just bring your family into the kitchen and hash this out? Because they'd been breaking eggs over my head for years while telling me to smile. Because the kitchen had become their stage. And because this isn't how you fix a machine that's bolted to the floor of a town that depends on it. You don't whisper into the grease and hope it purifies itself. You flush it. In the sunlight. The room wavered. People murmured that this can't be legal. Others, sweet souls, said, bless her heart, which in our town means you don't know whether to hug or call 911. Before the hospital's council could call the recess, the AG representative, charitable law section, who had been sitting in the back, pretending to be no one stood. He held up a badge. I'm going to suggest we keep the cameras rolling, he said. The violinist put her bow down with a tiny clink. You could hear the air move. Before I rewind the clock further and tell you how the cookbook and the janitor and the dishwasher all lead here, I said into the mic, I want to say this. I didn't come to ruin anyone's life. I came to repair something we all own. We are better than this. I know it sounds like a line. I prepared it, sure, but I also meant it with everything in me. Remember where you're listening from? That room? It's the kind of place where high school teachers sit next to judges, where men who lay tile drink beer with cardiologists on Friday nights, where Mrs. Doyle sweeps up confetti after these sorts of evenings and takes leftovers to the shelter. Those rooms are America for all our flaws. Now, we rewind. Because before the signatures and the audio and the bank filings, there was a long stretch of days where I was a woman in a kitchen with a secret jammed inside a cookbook. When I first learned to shelve books, my supervisor told me, there's a right way to leave a book on a cart, spines out, foredge in, top edges facing the same direction. She was right. Keeping things in order is the only way to find them when you need them. My life became a cart. Everything in its place so when the time came, I could reach without fumbling. I started by cataloguing my humiliation. Not to wallow, to map out the pressure points. You can't make a plan if you don't know the shape of the bruise. At the school board fundraiser, Pam switched my assigned seat to the overflow table by the sound equipment. When the feedback squealed, it rattled my teeth. At the family pre-wedding dinner, Sabrina took a Sharpie to the seating cards and put me near the kitchen so we could chat. Every time the door swung open, cold air brushed my back and the smell of garlic burned my eyes. At the church picnic, Greg told a story on me. Remember when Ellie put money in internet coins? We thought we'd have to bail her out. To peals of laughter. Even the old men at the domino table chuckled, and one patted my hand like I'd tripped. In the group chat, a link to an article about bubble markets came with a string of rocket emojis. My grandson asked if Grandma was going to the moon. I sent a moon cookie emoji and then turned my phone face down on the table like you do with someone else's baby when it's screaming, sweetly, gently, with love. At the store, a clerk told me I qualified for the senior discount, and also workshops for digital literacy if you're getting scammed. I told him I'd love the discount and the workshop. He didn't know what to do with a woman who wasn't offended by being seen as old and wasn't afraid to be taught something. Every cut, every sting, became a pin on my mental map. Where did they think I was weak? Where could I slip through because they wrote me off? There's a reason older women bring casseroles. We can get into any room. I volunteered at the hospital thrift store 2 afternoons a week. Pam said it would get me out, like I was a dog that needed a walk. I sorted donated handbags. It's amazing what people leave in purses, receipts, business cards. A board member's wife's old bag gave me the name of a consultant who, when I looked him up, had 3 LLCs with a toolbox of ownership structures. I added him to the list. I brought cookies to the hospital's back office and sat with an admin while she vented about the new vendor requisition system. Everything goes through Pinecone, she said, scrunching her nose. We click, and it looks legit, but the rates, my God. The rates? I asked, dunking a cookie in my tea. If you act like something is normal, people tell you the truth. Higher, she said. But what do I know? I'm just the lady who enters things. She laughed, but she wasn't really laughing. Meanwhile, my attorney filed all the little papers that build a big thing. The trust, the LLC, the bank account that doesn't mean anything on the street until you decide it does. I don't think about numbers like a scoreboard. I think like a quilter. Pieces, patterns, and the way you connect them with seams that hold under stress. The seams here were the maintenance and storage building, a lease stacked on a lease. The vendor management company, a fig leaf. The hospital board's bylaws, they had language that sounded strong and teeth that were rubber. The bank with the note, willing to sell. The Attorney General's charitable law section, only as strong as the files in its hands. The press, hungry but cautious. My family, loud, ignorant to how loud they were, the kind of ignorance that'll make you trip on a rug you didn't see. I stitched. I met the state investigator at a diner in the next town over. We sat in a booth with cracked vinyl and ate eggs too fast. He didn't promise me he'd fix it. If there's something, we'll find it, he said. If there's not, we'll close it. I have more respect for that sentence than any speech I've heard at a gala. My son called less. When he did, it was about wedding logistics. He asked if I could host out-of-town guests because the Hayeses were maxed. I said yes and made a double recipe of my bean salad and laid out clean towels like a hotel. The guests were sweet. They asked about my garden. They called me Mrs. Whitford, and I said, Ellie is fine. And they didn't look embarrassed to say my first name, which is more than I can say for some family. One night, a week before the gala, I sat on the porch with a blanket over my knees. The night was crickets and decaying leaves. The air had that smell that means summer's giving up. I took the cookbook down. It's small and spiral-bound, and the pages stick in places from molasses or splashed vanilla. I slid out the card with the codes and touched it like a relic. I reminded myself that money is not magic. It's a tool. It doesn't care who uses it. You have to care. That's the whole job. I went to bed and dreamed that I was shelving books, and all the titles were the names of my family members. When I tried to file Greg under H for Hayes, the book slipped out of my hands, and the pages rained down like scales coming off a fish. I picked them up, and they were blank, except for receipts stapled to them. It doesn't take a psychologist to read that dream. Now, I know you're impatient for the fireworks, the gala, the tape, the claws. I brought you there already because that's how you keep people's attention. But stories aren't frosting, they're cake. You need structure under sugar. Okay. Back at the gala. After the audio played and the council called for a recess, the room did its dance. Board members pretended to need the restroom. Wives whispered. Men gathered near pillars with phones to their ears, like new fathers waiting for news. The reporter moved with a grace I envied, snagging quotes without making enemies she didn't need. My attorney stood at the edge of the stage like he was waiting for a bus. Calm. His calm settled me. Pam marched over. Her mouth was set. She always looked prettiest when she was furious. The blood makes her eyes greener. "What are you doing?" she hissed, low so only I could hear. "Giving the hospital a gift," I said. "With conditions." "It's not about the hospital. You're humiliating your family." "Family didn't need my help to do that," I said, almost gently. "This is jealousy," she said. "You can't bear that we're up here and you're not." "I cannot bear a wing built on top of people's backs," I said. "That's a load-bearing truth." She opened her mouth, closed it. The violinist laid down her bow again with that soft clink. Pam's eyes moved to David. He was pale. Sabrina whispered to him, rapid fire, and his jaw tightened. He didn't look at me. The board filed back. The hospital's counsel returned to the mic, eyes clear. You could see her deciding what kind of woman she'd be in this moment. It's a small town. You don't get to blow it off. "We have reviewed the clause," she said. "The board will vote to conditionally accept the gift, subject to a conflict review under our policy, which we are also strengthening in light of this information." She looked at the AG rep. He nodded. "We will place certain individuals on administrative leave pending the review." "Place?" Greg said, laugh half choke. "It's a charity ball. You can't place people." "We can," the hospital council said. "We just did." Security had shifted in that way they do when the orders change. It's not about muscle. It's about posture. They stopped being waiters with radios and started being men whose job is to move other men without violence. "Furthermore," the council said, and you could feel the room lean forward like wheat in a wind. The hospital was just notified that the storage complex note has a new holder. We intend to begin reviewing that lease and all related contracts immediately. If any are in violation, we will terminate. "That will breach," Greg said, but he said it to air, because no one was listening to him now. He had been the sun. The room had rotated for him. He felt the dark, and he panicked. "Arrest him," someone hissed, which was premature, but I understand the desire. The AG rep lifted a hand. "We will not be making arrests tonight," he said calmly. "We will be requesting records tomorrow. We advise the board to maintain current documents and preserve anything, digital or otherwise, that may be relevant." It wasn't as dramatic as a perp walk. It was more powerful, because it was rules. Rules, correctly enforced, are the invisible skeleton that keeps a town standing. Memorize that. It seems boring until it's breathing. The MC rattled, tried to resume the program. No one cared. People stayed. People clustered. People took sides, quietly, in nods and the angles of their shoulders. The busboy finally delivered the creme brulees. Some people ate them. Most sat, spoons in bowls, sugar crust uncracked. My son walked to me. He stopped. He looked at the floor. "Mum?" he said. His voice was small, not boy small, human small. Not here," I said, "because I've learned not to build a bridge on wet paint." He swallowed and nodded. Sabrina hovered. Her eyes glittered. Tears or anger doesn't matter. Glitter is glitter. This is cruel, she said. Our wedding. You picked a date and a dress, I said. You can pick an ethical seat to put yourself in too. She made a sound like a door's hinges half oiled and turned away. Pam's hands shook, but she stood tall. She's not a villain. She fell in love with a man who gave her certainty like a drug. She felt that drug leave her bloodstream now, and it wasn't pretty. I watched like I watch my students struggle through a sentence and find the word on their own. Painful. Necessary. The reporter came to me. Ellie, she said. Why tonight? If not tonight, when? I asked. If not here, where? They want to put names on a wing? Here's mine. Are you... She didn't finish. She didn't have to. Are you the donor? I am the librarian, I said. Who knows how to read the fine print? She smiled. Real smiles reach the eyes. Thank you. She walked away. Remember the cookbook? Here's why it matters. The next morning, the AG's office arrived at the hospital with a subpoena. The administrator had been smart or sloppy. I choose to believe smart. The printouts were stacked in boxes. A man with a rubber stamp thumped them. Thump, thump, thump. That sound is better than fireworks. Paper is how misdeeds travel. Paper brings them home. In those boxes was a copy of a revised vendor agreement. In the margins, a handwriting that looked like Greg's had scrawled, "Make sure Ellie gets the senior discount." I laughed when the investigator showed me, in spite of myself. People who mock you leave fingerprints. You don't have to argue with them. They record themselves. The AG interview took 3 hours. I brought a thermos of coffee and sandwiches like a school field trip. I wasn't there to gloat. I was there to steady my nervous system and answer questions accurately. When the investigator asked how I paid for the note purchase, I told him. The secret was not that I had money. The secret was that I'd taught myself not to treat money as a god. If you can do that, you can walk into rooms you never thought you'd see. If you're expecting an arrest at the gala, it didn't happen. If you wanted handcuffs, I'm sorry to disappoint you. That's TV. In real life, the first wave looks like paperwork and men who don't sleep well for a month. My son came over that night. He knocked. I opened. He stood in the cold and looked like the boy I drove to school, the man with a proposal down on one knee, and the teenager who slammed his door on me. All of those people. Layered. He held up a hand like a peace flag. I didn't know, he said. I warned you, I said. You told me I was out of my depth. He nodded. I did. He's a good man under imitations of other men. He can say I did without a but. That's how I know. He sat at my table. When did you get rich? He asked, almost amused by the word in his mouth. I got careful, I said. Careful turned into choices. Choices turned into leverage. The internet coins helped, sure. But what I've got is time and a jam jar and a lot of nights making lists. He smiled, like he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. You saved the hospital, he said. No, I said. The hospital saved itself because people did their jobs. I nudged. He put his head in his hands, and then he laughed. And it was his laugh, my boy's, uncontaminated by Greg. I'm sorry, he said. For the lawyer with the sunburst card, for the jokes, for thinking money made someone right. Money makes people loud, I said. Rightness is quiet. It's a clean ledger. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Here's the part where you want me to say he broke up with Sabrina that night. Life isn't a movie. They fought. They reconciled. They fought again. The scandal steamrolled through town like a storm front, and in the pressure changes, you see what's built of brick and what's built of sticks. Their relationship was a stick structure, but it didn't collapse that night. It creaked, and creaks turn into cracks. Now the larger reckoning. You've been patient with me. We did the first small wave and the family fallout. The big wave arrived, as it does, with more boxes. The press didn't need me after that. They had invoices. The AG's office had leased space in the basement, like a short-term staging area. The reporter ran quotes from nurses who'd worked double shifts while consultants billed at $400 an hour to streamline bed turnover. The headline wasn't clever. It didn't need to be. Numbers are their own poetry. Greg resigned from the board before they voted him out, because men like him hate to be fired. He called it taking time to be with family, which made me snort milk into my cereal. I don't apologize. If you will use family as a shield, you don't get to be mad when women laugh. His CFO, more nervous than nimble, turned state's witness after 3 meetings with the AG's office. He didn't go to jail that week. He did lose his memberships. He did get the look in the grocery store lines people give when they're trying not to make a scene for the kids. That's its own punishment. I'm not proud I find that satisfying. But I do. The board voted to accept the clause and the gift. The hospital's council made a little speech in a video clip about values. I wrote a check. It was 8 figures. I had never written a number like that. My hand didn't shake then either. I wore the same sweater I wear to rake leaves. I asked that the wing be named for the nurses who've been there 30 years. They argued for Whitford. I said, "No, thank you. Name a reading room after me. Put a lamp in it." They laughed. I meant it. The AG referral triggered a broader review. The state called 3 other towns where Pinecone had fingers, and those towns started pulling their own receipts. This is the larger reckoning. Systems are copycats. Fix one. The neighbours look through their windows. The State Attorney General's press conference wasn't dramatic. It was an older man in an unflattering suit saying compliance and fiduciary duty a lot. It was beautiful. I made popcorn. A national paper picked up the story because the number next to my donation made it math they wanted to do in front of readers. The reporter called me a crypto granny. I rolled my eyes. Gran. Yes. Granny, please. Internet coins saved me from nothing. They gave me a lever. I worked the lever. A lever without a fulcrum is a stick. Don't forget that. Sabrina's parents, seeing the weather vane swing, suggested a postponement for the wedding. She dug in. They eloped to a beach where the wind knocked white flowers off rented chairs. The wedding package included a video montage. I watched it on my computer, and I cried because I had hoped to cry in a church with my town and confetti made of shredded coloured paper. Our tears are not magical. They just lubricate the gears when it hurts to turn. David came home 3 months later, ring finger bare, face thinner. "It didn't take," he said, in the kitchen with the ceramic clink, like always. "We want different things." "What do you want?" I asked. "I want to feel like a good man," he said. It was the right answer. He moved into a small place, took a job with a maintenance contractor who joined the post-scandal board. They have good policies now. Imagine that. Pam didn't speak to me for 6 months. Then she called. She sounded old, not elderly, just like someone who'd finally noticed the miles. "You could have come to me," she said. "I tried," I said. We sat on the phone breathing at each other for a while. Then she said, "Greg wants to see you." And I said, "No." The guilt was quiet, more like a shadow when the sun goes behind a cloud than a storm. I don't owe men like him a stage. The hospital wing rose. The contractor, local, chosen openly with bids, put up windows that actually existed. The donor plaque had 30 names: nurses, janitors, Mrs. Doyle. Mine was in the reading room. I brought the cookbook. I slid the card into a book about Ohio birds and put it on the shelf. I laughed, then moved it to the server closet with a note to myself to retrieve it later. Kidding. I won't tell you where I put it. But I did bring the cookbook to the room, and I did hold it against my chest like a baby, because I am not made of stone. My house got a new dishwasher. I had it installed by the kid in the hoodie, now grown, who hugged me so hard I thought my ribs would crack. "You made my mom proud," he said unexpectedly. "She's the one who told me to go back to school nights. She cried at the story." "Tell her it wasn't a story," I said. "Tell her it was paper. Paper matters." I was walking out of the hospital one day, months after the gala, when I heard the soft clink of a violinist setting her bow in a case. A volunteer looked up. "Ms. Whitford," she said, "do you want a cookie?" She offered me a chocolate chip from a plastic tray. I ate it in the elevator like I was 12. The elevator mirrored me back, an older woman with good posture and a sweater with pilly sleeves. People would call me rich if they had to. I don't mind. I have a better word. Useful. If you've stayed with me this long, you've earned a last little twist I didn't see coming either. At the reading room dedication, the hospital's counsel pulled me aside. "I'm leaving for the state," she said. "They offered me a role in charitable law." She smiled, real again. "Your clause will be in my pocket every time we look at a gift." That clause was written by my attorney, sure, but it had my thumbprint. It'll live past me. If you're young and wondering how to plant something that grows when you're gone, go write a good policy. Name it after a woman who doesn't care if her name is on it. The world doesn't need more plaster with titles. It needs rules that keep the lights on. I told you all this in my voice because the difference between being a story and having a voice is who holds the mic. At the gala, I took it. I put it back. The point wasn't to be loud. It was to be clear. And now, because this is a YouTube story and we're here together, tell me where you're watching from. Drop your city in the comments. Subscribe if you want more of these long drives through real life with a woman who learned to read fine print. Share your own family vindication moment. I read them. I take notes. Future me might need to hand someone a microphone again. To anyone listening in a small town, at a kitchen table, with a secret tucked inside a book, don't confuse kindness with weakness. Don't confuse money with power. Don't confuse volume with authority. Put your things in order. Choose your day. And when the moment comes, don't shout. Just stand up with your spine like a mast and say your 3 words. Mine were read the clause. Yours might be check the ledger, or run the tape, or open the books. It'll be enough. If you want the coda, the little bow on the package, here it is. 6 months after the gala, the hospital had an open house to show the steel rising from the mud. A little boy with a cowlick and a skinned knee ran his hand along the scaffold and beamed like he'd climbed Mount Everest. His grandmother, someone I didn't know, scolded him gently. "That's not ours," she whispered. I crouched. "It is," I said. "It belongs to you." He looked at me like I had just made a coin appear behind his ear. Maybe I had. Not an internet one. A neighbour one. Those spend better. And because I promised near the start that something as small as a dish clink mattered, Mrs. Doyle retired from the thrift store with a sheet cake in the break room. When she set down the plates, ceramic clinked ceramic, just like the day they brought casseroles for Jack. She hugged me. "We're square," she said. It felt like a ledger closing with a flourish. Not a bank ledger, the kind towns keep in their chest. The kind that has your name written under good, with a check mark and a little heart. We are often laughed at before we are heard. Let them laugh. Then build something they can't ignore, and make it so fair they'll never dare tear it down. If this story found you, subscribe and tell me where you're listening from. And if you've got your own "they laughed, I persisted" story, leave it for me below. We're all braver when our stories touch. End.